So now let's look at the COVID crisis. We were manipulated by powerful forces. But what those powerful forces attempted to do was create an intolerable zone of discomfort, pain, and fear for anybody who stepped out of a narrative that was like a home base. It was safe. Not surprising that people bought it en masse, right? They were effectively captives of something. And to the extent that they attempted to think an independent thought, they got a very quick indication that all hell was going to break loose in their life. And they watched other people step out of line and get fried right and left, have accusations delivered at them, Wikipedia pages full of slander, all that stuff. And so I guess the point is, I think we saw a version of the same psychological process in the COVID crisis as we know takes place, and we call it Stockholm Syndrome. But I don't know if we said Stockholm Syndrome during the COVID crisis, but I think it's the same module, which detects, there's actually no future in thinking for yourself in this environment.
Well, and Stockholm Syndrome writ somewhat larger than it is usually imagined for those who've been abducted, but somewhat smaller than North Korea, would be what you see in cults. Right. So individuals who are taken in, usually willingly at first, maybe begin to recognize that they have effectively had at least their mental capacities abducted, that they are believing untrue things. But part of what keeps them in line is being given a little bit of power to wield over those who might step out of line. And so we definitely saw that during COVID with the American populace, the people who wielded the social tools, the psychological tools of destroying relationships between people who said, actually, I'm not going to comply. The non-compliant were bludgeoned mentally. Constantly. And we know this is true during the Cultural Revolution in China. And I imagine it to be true of how, to some degree, the population is kept in line in North Korea. But again, of course, we don't really know what's going on there.
Right. So it sounds like you are in agreement that that's not a false connection between Maoist China, COVID crisis, Stockholm Syndrome, writ narrowly, and the expected belief of somebody inside North Korea where there's just simply no value in seeing reality for what it is, that actually well-being flows from seeing reality as it's portrayed by those with absolute power over you.
Absolutely.
That's a category. Okay, so then I think we are beginning to get at the theme I was trying to wrestle free from this set of observations, which is the initial expectation is dark ages should be all but impossible because of the tendency to get better, to get smarter over time. And so therefore, anybody who deviates from whatever plan is making you smarter over time ought to have a competitive disadvantage. And so you basically ought to have a mechanism that, keeps you out of the ditches on both sides of the road, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody ought to be sticking to this pretty much all the time because getting smarter creates more well-being. But we now see that there are reasons why you might expect people to embrace something that didn't make them smarter, because smarter, how can I phrase this? All else being equal, smarter always beats dumber. But all else is not always equal, because to the extent that somebody else is in control of the well-being that flows to you or the harm that flows to you, they can exactly reverse those parameters. Right. And there are reasons that they might want to. Right? We have narrow reasons why they might want to. A regime that is fragile might turn up the dial on punishing insight because its persistence required it, and the human mind might embrace the reality of the situation, which is, hey, I only get fed when I say the right stuff. And it might actually then, this now goes over into Bob Triver's home turf about self-deception. So the point is, okay, if you lived in an environment where every time you said something actually insightful, you got a little closer to starvation, and every time you said something that sounded like the regime, you got a little extra rations, then the point is, well, the best thing for you to do is actually not only say the right stuff, but activate that model. Activate that model so it's intuitive to you, so that you believe it every minute of the day. You don't say something awkward because some part of you knows the truth. You would actively purge the truth from your mind, and you would embrace a model that was not predictive because it was like pseudo-predictive.
Absolutely. So I will just say, we talked about this during the height of the COVID craziness, the Matthias Desmet's book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism. It speaks to some degree to these issues of how do you get people who believe that their highest values are free thinking to become compliant and to, in fact, require compliance of others.
I agree. I'm trying to think back to exactly whether this exact issue is in there or I don't know. But one way of thinking about it is that, of course, for millions of years of our ancestry, that's the human past and the pre-human past, your insight about the world around you tends to manifest in, hard to describe it exactly. First order, it manifests as food. The better you understand your habitat, the more able you are to extract resources from it. But there's also stuff like the better you understand your habitat, the better able you are to preserve the resources that you've already consumed, right? You waste less energy trying to stay warm. You accumulate more energy from sources that are worth your while. The sources tend to be more worth your while the better you get at doing that. So the point is, not starving is a good proxy for insight. Anybody who's in a position to control your food is in a position to create a gradient of calories that will then lead you into nonsensical thinking, and they might have reasons to do it, which are narrow, right? They may be terrorists who've captured you and wish to trade you for something. They may be a fragile regime that needs you to believe wrong stuff in order to stay in power. But anyway, there are reasons that somebody might reverse that gradient on you in order to get you to be compliant. Now, here's the next phase of what I've been wrestling with. There are two levels of informational advantage that are clearly distinct in their value. One is you could know that certain statements are false when other people don't know it, either because they're lying to themselves in order to stay out of danger or for whatever reason. But you could know that something is false, right? But not be especially insightful. The other way is to be especially insightful. And
which is to say, to know true things that other people don't know.
True things that nobody's figured out.
You can recognize falsehoods and you can recognize truths. And just as it is easier to destroy than it is to create, it is, on balance, easier to recognize falsehoods than that are not broadly recognized than to recognize truths that are either entirely otherwise unrecognized or not broadly recognized.
Right. And in fact, you could imagine an economy amongst people who had a superior position informationally, people who were well positioned in the regime, whatever the regime is, and so they had insider information. And the point is, they're going to know that certain stuff isn't true, right? These shots are safe and effective. No, they're not. Don't take the shot, right? That's recognizing a falsehood that you have privileged access to the information about. Knowing what is true at the level of the biology of the immune system, well, that's complex. And the only way you're going to get to superior information about complex issues like that is to have some sort of program of study that's capable of finding those counterintuitive, highly obscure facts that actually carry a tremendous amount of value to them, right?
Yeah, that's certainly the only way when you're dealing with some of the elements in a system are hyper-novel, like mRNA technology.
Right. And so what's hard to imagine is it's very easy for some sort of rent-seeking elites to disrupt our ability to make sense of the world around us, right? They can capture the universities, they can cause them to do cruddy science and all of that. And then they can be ahead because they know more than we do. What they can't do is be enlightened, right? They can't, unless they're going to build private establishments, private institutions that do science, don't talk to anybody about it, which, I mean, I'm not saying they never do this. There are skunk works, there are private labs studying all kinds of things. But the problem is what really made us smarter was a university system that covered civilization, right? Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people participating in a collective effort to figure out what's true about the universe. That was very functional. And the point is, well, if you've only got 10,000 people trying to figure out what's true, then your truth-seeking is going to be feeble relative to a public effort that involved, huge numbers of institutions and individuals. So anyway, I'm not quite sure what to do with that, but I think there's a decided difference between which kind of information, both are profitable. Seeing the future more clearly than others because you have a deep understanding of the universe is great. It's much better than knowing what's just a lie. But it's much more likely for somebody to be able to generate access to privileged information about what lies are without figuring out how to replace the world's university system. So what I'm getting at there is that this particular dark age, I keep asking myself, and other people keep asking me, do they know what they're doing?
Right.
Do they, are they...
What kind of intention is here? Is this a plan?
Are these people as dumb as they seem? They certainly know more about what's coming than we do. Does that mean that they have some plan where this doesn't end in a catastrophe, or are they just numbskulls who don't understand that, yes, they are going to be ahead until the catastrophe that they're inviting, at which point they're going to be as gone as the rest of us?
Right.